Welcome to the Mental Advantage Podcast. Whether you're an athlete trying to perform at your best when it counts the most, a coach or business leader trying to get more out of your team, or someone looking for more personal growth, this is the place for you. This podcast is your map to guide you to the right mindset, systems, and strategies you need to become the best version of yourself. And now, here's John Cullen and Brandon Allen.
Yeah, so I've got a green egg, or it's a grill master. It's the same thing. I've got a Weber gas grill, and then I've got a Blackstone griddle. So
look at you! You are the grill master.
Hey, listen. With the situation, the setup we have over here, we'll do like hibachi on the Blackstone, or listen. I've put like 6 pounds of bacon out there in a morning, and there is nothing that smells better at 8:30 in the morning and on a fall Saturday than to have like bacon going and the fall smells. I
thought you were going to say there was nothing that'll get your neighbors over to your house faster than the smell of 8 pounds of bacon.
The neighbors like to come over because the dog's barking.
Nice. Yeah, they appreciate that. Especially the earlier, the better.
We kind of, that one kind of got nipped in the bud about 2 weeks, or not even, maybe 2 days of moving in. They came over and met me in the driveway, and I don't know that conversation went the way it's going to.
He's raining on us. Yeah, that's awesome. And by the way, we're going to have to bleep out all of those name brands because we don't give free advertisement on on the Mental Advantage podcast. Welcome to the show. We have Brandon and I were just breaking down his grill habits. Evidently, I've got Guy Fieri as a co-host. I didn't realize it. So we have a great guest actually this evening, Grant Parr. Grant is a founder of GameFace Performance. He's the author of the Next One Up Mindset book and also his own podcast, 90% Mental, and really believe he's going to be a great guest for you guys to hear a little bit about some of what he feels are those best practices, best guidelines to have that next one up mentality. And gets in, has an amazing story, just a really, really amazing story about coming back from his own personal adversity.
Yeah. And I think some of the stuff that you talk about, grit, and that's one of the things that Grant talked about, to overcome what he overcame. It certainly requires, self-confidence and determination and grit. And I think, it's something that we should all strive to create situations that allow you to have more of that in your life. I mean, I think it's developed, right? So I'm excited to hear what he says and to get some of the feedback from our listeners.
Absolutely. So here's Grant Parr. We've got Grant Parr on the program tonight, and Grant grew up in California. Really excited to hear his story. Here's somebody who's a mental performance coach and a sports psychologist, works with many athletes and business executives, and what I will call preparing them for greatness, because I think some of the work you do and the content, actually, what I love about your content, Grant, is that I know you're doing an excellent job with your clients that you have through GameFace Performance, but you deliver so much good content out there and you make yourself open that I think it helps a lot of other people as well. So I'm anxious to hear more from you tonight. But Grant wrote the book, Next One Up Mindset. He's the host of his own podcast, which is 90% Mental. And as I mentioned earlier, he's the founder of GameFace Performance. So Grant, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited. I'm always excited to not only talk about my journey, but mental performance and how it impacts people's lives and performances. So I'm excited.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was listening to you say something on a podcast recently that I thought was so true. As you said, it usually you just call yourself a performance coach with some clients because just the idea of a mental performance coach gives them sort of a little bit of a queasy feeling, or maybe there's a stigma there, right? Like, what's wrong with me that I need to have a mental performance coach?
Right. I found that at the high school level, and you got to know your audience, you got to know, your athletes, your teams, your coaches, but typically at the high school level and below, I'll call myself a performance coach because when they're seen by, their teammates or their girlfriends or boyfriends or parents, and they're seen with a mental performance coach, that could be a negative thing. But my number one goal is to actually build trust and rapport. So they don't care about my title. They just care about that I'm actually a resource that can help them improve, and also with that stigma, and I think it's beautiful right now as a society that we are at a point where we have mental health as a huge focus. And with this work, when we can get athletes of all levels, even parents and coaches, we can get bought into addressing mental health. What we're actually doing is we're actually turning mental health into mental wealth. And that to me is like, because I know some people are like, oh, they have mental health issues and it's a bad thing. Well, it's not a bad thing. It's a great thing that people are actually coming out and talking about it, but we're turning it around and reframing it that we're turning this awesome thing that we need to actually address into mental wealth.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree with that more. I think it's one of those things that for so long people don't realize, I think we're so reliant on talent, for example, as being that one separator. And they don't realize that, whether you're in the business world, whether you're in athletics, whatever the case may be, everyone's dealing with something, right? Everybody's got something that they're dealing with. So I want to hear all about GameFace Performance and your clients and kind of some of the things that you're working with them on. But I also want to, one of the things we do at the beginning of the show is we always kind of get early from your early years, what were some of the steps along the way? What were some of the pivot points for you? So I think what I'll do with you, because I know a little bit about your story from reading the book and just following you on social media, is I think I'll let you kind of tell this story and incorporate where you want to add in all those early influences, as well as talking a little bit about how GameFace Performance got started.
Yeah, I'll just share a little bit about just my practice and then kind of go backwards so we can go forward.
Yep.
But so my practice, GameFace Performance, it's a mental performance practice, and I work with all levels of performance. So professional, Olympians, collegiate, high school, and youth. I also, when I say all levels of performance, I'm working with, I call corporate athletes, so executives. I work with musicians. I work with doctors. Anybody that's performing a role, right? There's a similarity with all the roles from athletics to the workplace, even in acting. It's thoughts and emotions. So I teach people how to actually put in a process at a moment's notice to align the thoughts and emotions so they can make the best decision in the moment. And all this work that I actually focus on is, yes, it's about mindfulness. It's about being present, about being where your feet are. But when you play any sport, it's not about training necessarily for that whole game. I understand that we do that for stamina and to outlast our opponents and all that. I get it. But it's about training for the moment. Because as you were talking about being physically great, I mean, you could be the greatest player of all time, but how great are you in the moment when the team needs you the most or when you need yourself the most? So a lot of my work, not only am I doing mental skills training at all levels, I also do leadership training as well. So do that with athletes, teams, and coaches, and also with corporations.
Yeah, I love the fact that you call them, what is it, professional athletes, or what's the word you use for those corporate athletes?
Yeah, corporate athletes.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so true what you say there. There's an expression. So I came up kind of under that Brian Cain tree, if you will. And Cainer always likes to say, you can't win the moment if you're not in the moment, right? And that's one of those things that I think is so important, is really, really dialing into what's the next best decision I can make? What are as we talk about the 200-foot approach, is if you think about headlights, and that let's just focus on where I am and within the next 200 feet and go from there. And that's good no matter what walk of life. Like you said, whether that's an athlete or whether you're somebody in the corporate world, I think it's becoming harder. Have you found, Grant, to get people, especially during something like this pandemic, to get people really focused in the moment and not allow all of those external influences to start to take over their mind?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up, because there's been a theme for the past year. And it's been more so stressed through my efforts, and I think it's probably one of the most important things that we need, as not as just performers but humans, is that we need to focus on connection and connecting. And so I like to look at that word connection, and then look the word, the root word of it is connect. So we need to stay connected to our craft, and then we also need to actually focus on connection, meaning that focus our energies on the people that are going to feed us and that we're going to feed them. Because during crisis, we'll talk about opportunities, from a crisis, but I think it's so important that we stay connected to our craft. Do all the hard work in the dark so you can shine in the light. And I'll tell you what, I am seeing right now that things are opening up. I see the athletes that have been connected to their craft this whole time, and you can see the athletes that haven't. And they're going backwards to go forwards, and they're trying to play catch up. And in some cases, it's really tough to see, because they're struggling, because not only are they out of shape, but there's no rhythm. You can feel there's no rhythm within what they're doing. So I just feel like it's really important that whether if you're, a professional in the workplace, corporate athlete, coach, the biggest thing is to stay connected. And that is a lot of the mental skills that I talk about. All the things that I teach athletes allows you to get connected in the present moment.
Yeah. At the beginning of this year, you and some of the athletes I work with, and even some of the business people, I talked about this idea of writing your own story for 2020. And at the end of the year, you're going to either say one or two things. Will you be able to say, I was able to accomplish all of these things because of COVID? This was all I was able to accomplish because of COVID. Or are you going to be able to say, I was able to accomplish all these things in spite of COVID? And that's really what it comes down to, is, are you going to use it as a crutch or something that was limiting? Because it's the same for everybody, but someone's going to find a way to make it happen. Go ahead, Brandon.
Well, I was just curious. You talk about connection and kind of not just from a mental perspective, but I know, Grant, you talk about coaching the heart of the athlete, which is got to be a little. It's challenging right now, right? I mean, it's definitely a different thing. But could you talk a little bit about what that means to coach the heart of the athlete?
Yeah, it's to me, it's just that component of transformational coaching. And more often, I wouldn't even say more often than not, I had just seen throughout my life as an athlete and as a coach that there's more to just the athlete. There's a person inside there. And so for a coach, it's about getting to know the person first before you really understand the athlete. Get to know that person, that athlete, he or she, outside of sport, and really connect and get that relationship so dialed in, so trusting, that vulnerability takes place. There's something that I say all the time, and actually I got this from my mentor, Grant Parr, is victory goes with vulnerable. If the coach can coach that athlete to be so vulnerable and crack open their chest, man, it makes the whole coaching the athlete way easier, because you get them. Sure. But if you're just focusing on the physical talent, sometimes you're going to be left in the dark as a coach. So it's about really just asking all those questions outside of sport, about their school, about their family, about their goals, their aspirations, the music they listen to, like really get to know them from the inside out.
Yeah, it's a really critical piece of coaching in general, managing, leading people, is finding out those whys. Why are they, acting this way? What is it that they feel is limiting them from achieving some of the things that they are trying to achieve? So take me back, Grant, if you will, because I want to go back to, I know, as I mentioned earlier, you grew up in California, you started playing football